Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Yewande Pearse, and I am so excited to be leading this conversation between myself, Annie Fischer, Antajuan Scott, and Stacy Switzer about Emergence, a genealogy, which is a project under development for the Getty Pacific Standard Time Initiative, opening in 2024. First of all, I'm Dr. Yewande Pearse. I'm a neuroscientist with a background in neurodegeneration and gene and stem cell therapy, a mouthful, and a science communicator who works in the intersection of science and culture. I love an origin story, so let's begin there, hearing a little bit about what brought each of you to this project and why now. Stacy, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I would just say a little bit about my interest in bioart and where it came from. It's abiding. It's been quite a long while. I worked at a museum in the middle of Kansas called the Salina Art Center, and I was organizing an exhibition with my great colleagues there. And I wrote to two artists who have since become very acclaimed in the bioart world, Oran Katz and Yonat Zur of Tissue Culture and Art Project. And I said, cold call email, can I include your living tissue sculptures in this exhibition I'm doing in Salina, Kansas? And lo and behold, I don't think we ever spoke on the phone, but they sent me a package that contained tissue sculptures via regular post. And that was the beginning. And it's all been uphill in a good way since then.
Annie, how about you?
Yeah, when we started talking about what the possibilities were for our PST proposal, I think we considered a handful of options, but bioart pretty quickly rose to the top. My background as a writer, I was more preoccupied with psychology, emotionality, consciousness. You take a small topic within bioart that's like human life extension, there's brilliant innovation, and there's tech I couldn't possibly wrap my head around, and there's enormous potential for medicine and health and humanity at large. Taking a global perspective, looking at how everybody thinks about just one small topic within this larger thing, just it's rich territory, and it was exciting to all of us.
Fathomers is actually one of 45 cultural, educational, and scientific institutions throughout Southern California to receive support from the Getty Foundation for their projects. Can you talk a little bit about what went into the creation of that grant proposal and what the inspiration was behind it? I think maybe, Antoine, you have some things to share about that.
Yeah, I think when we began to focus on the theme within Emergence, we knew that the connections needed to be strong to the sciences, but also situated in a way that really was future facing and had a real root in our reality today. And so as we began to think about synthetic biology as a global experience, all of the things that make us who we are and the things that we need began to emerge as ways to enter this topic, our health, our connections and pathways to medicine, thinking about life preservation, thinking about food sources, our future is really connected to synthetic biology in a real way.
Yeah, it's wild to think about now because we submitted that application on March 20th of 2020. LA had maybe just that week issued its first lockdown. So it was kind of a strange moment. And we'd also been in the months leading up to the application, we'd been so immersed in reading and thinking about CRISPR and genomics and public health, and particularly as they relate to racial and environmental and social injustices. So 2020 sort of cemented the urgency for us. But we were also just really excited about the possibility of being involved with PST at large. We're also explicitly committed as an organization to the production of long-term research. We know that the most interesting things emerge when you haven't identified your outcomes. You can trust that process and something great will come out of it in the end.
I think that will be really engaging and exciting. Stacy.
Yeah, I think something very particular that Fathomers does, which sometimes kind of occurs behind a screen, is to set the stage, right? Make space for things to unfold that just couldn't have unfolded otherwise. I can't even say that it's really necessarily kind of matchmaking between an artist and a scientist. Those things happen pretty organically. even in the conversations that we've had with you, Yewande, it's like, okay, well, what is your role? Like, you might make something with the tiny brains that you've been cultivating, right? And like that conversation, kind of finding the edges of the project together is what's really exciting and a lot of fun. And it's also something that we want to do more in public and with folks who are, joining us today and in the future.
So let's move into synthetic biology a little bit. I mean, it dates back to the 70s, first of all, and even now, if you're kind of still confused about what synthetic biology is, it's not surprising because defining it isn't the easiest thing to do, even amongst scientists. It combines biology and genetics and chemistry, computer science, and as we've heard so far in the conversation, it can also involve art too. So lots of different perspectives. That's what makes it such an incredible field. I guess you can think of it in two ways. So there's the top-down approach that really involves redesigning organisms with new enhanced characteristics. So it's about adding a function. And then there's the bottom-up approach, designing and constructing new biological parts or devices and systems which draw their inspiration from biology. And so when you think about biology, the endeavor is to try and understand how DNA informs all these living systems, what is the structure and the chemistry of living things. Whereas synthetic biology looks at DNA as a raw material that can be used as a tool and create novel and potentially very useful things. And that's what's interesting, is how you use it. And the gap between real life science and science fiction is closing. And as it does, our appetite and our capacity to envision new possibilities, it grows. And so the exciting part is that will then go back and inform more synthetic biology. Maybe Antoine, you can comment on this, about what is the most exciting, like the wildest possibility that excites you?
Thinking about this from the curatorial perspective, we are really meeting with people who are thinking about changing our world as we know it. We are seeing that there are workshops and spaces all over the world that are actually making inroads in improving our connections to our lifeline through synthetic biology. And I really hope that this exhibition exposes those individuals. I think that is the most wonderful thing and the most far out thing about synthetic biology and what we've been undertaking so far is that the people that we met are really spirited, and they want a better world, and not just for themselves, but for our future, the world that we won't see, or perhaps we will. I think that's like the thing about the show. It's really, really fascinating. And I think that the people are the most fascinating part for me. And I just hope that, within it is some gems.
I think there's so much room for creativity, and it's so great to see how much positive creativity is happening. In synthetic biology, it holds a lot of promise as a route to develop novel applications. We've talked about medicine and agriculture, energy, and also other industries. But there are questions that begin to arise the further you get into these possibilities. So I'm wondering how you think that we strike a balance between that awareness and that fear, because it's of course so exciting, but then these things happen so fast we haven't had a chance to think about some of the ethical implications.
There are certainly moral issues that have been and will continue to be the stuff of Hollywood. It lends itself to a dystopic view, right? The designer babies and new eugenics movements, a baddie with the God complex. But I think there are lots and lots and lots of other ethical issues that are at present being acknowledged and voiced by people who are invested in bringing about better or alternative futures. The lack of oversight and regulation, the inequity in STEM fields, the extractive practices and aggravation of injustice. I think we're probably all familiar with Henrietta Lacks, with that story. But, there's also that scientists are increasingly extracting data sets from indigenous communities, like the Hadza people of Tanzania, who are studied extensively for the richness and biodiversity of their microbiota, and the pharmaceutical companies who profit from drugs whose, formulas are based on traditional indigenous plant medicine. All of this just like, it perpetuates the colonial relationship by Western institutions that then control access to healthcare and funding. I think a big part of our jobs for Emergence is to find artists and to find artworks that engage us to think through these issues.
Stacy, I'm wondering if you've got any thoughts about the ethics and how we keep this positive overview, but we make sure that we're moving forward in a really positive, impactful way.
Something that I think you may be here tonight, but Dr. Lonnie Brooks, who's working on another project with us called Afro-Rhythms from the Future, has really instilled in us is this idea of making the worlds that you want to live in. His practice with his collaborator, Ahmed Best, is just so expansive and inventive. When I look through the lens of that project at something like Emergence, really wonderful possibilities start to open up for me. Or also with Michael Jones McKean's 12 Earths project with us. Michael's doing so much amazing research in ways that touch very directly synthetic biology. Curatorially, I was kind of geeking out on the curatorial for a minute, finding moments where projects can feed each other and feeling like we're actually really are growing an intellectual community and family of folks who just keep kind of coming to the table to nourish each other's projects is really important to me. Going beyond the speculative into like real places, real communities that we want to be and live in and work together on.
Absolutely. And Antajuan, I know that there are a few things that you can add to that as well from your perspective on working on this project.
Yeah, absolutely. When I think about the speculative futures attached to Emergence, I immediately think of our histories. What does it mean to recreate experiences that are no longer? Our connection to flavor and food, and with the ever increasing temperatures from our climate, there being so many shifts in our agricultural environment, things that once connected us to our cultures could disappear. And I think in our future, in our speculative futures, we see a more harmonious connection to things like our microbiome. And I think that synthetic biology has the ability to actually give us more connections to possibly who we are, because it's going to be rooted in who we are going to become. And so, there's a lot of philosophical leanings within, I think, the speculative futures connected to Emergence, but I'm most excited about what we're able to do now and what we're able to show now. And I think some of that is going to seem future facing for our audiences, and that's really exciting.
So the intersection of art and science is such fertile ground, and art can be a powerful lens through which a lot of developments can be understood within synthetic biology, but beyond as well. So, it's more than just a pretty vessel, which I think we're moving away from within that space. It's not just about making science more accessible. So how do you think these developments in synthetic biology are filtering down and across the art world?
Yeah, I can say something about that. So, admittedly, I'm extremely biased because we also worked with Phil Ross. But if anybody has followed the trajectory of the artist Phil Ross over the last couple of years, he started out as a chef and an artist who was like making weird things out of mycelium, footstools and things. Now he has a company called Microworks, and they're making fine heritage mycelium leather. The way that his art making and his sort of tinkering experiments are now filtering across culture, because he was really one of, a small handful of early mycelium advocates who were saying, look, mushrooms can do all of these different things and they might save the world, right? And now we read about another article about this, every day. So I think he's a great example. I pulled a quote from Jane Metcalf, who's one of the co-founders of Wired magazine. So she says, changes in our DNA, whether they come from random mutations or from clever gene therapies, will alter the range of possible human outcomes. But culture, including the scenarios we imagine, the stories we tell, our decisions about which technologies to fund or buy, will determine which of our possible futures actually occur.
Thank you for that. I'd never come across that quote before, but I agree with you. I think it really encapsulates what the potential of bioart is and its purpose. And this is making me really excited about Emergence. Also wanting to hear a little bit about where you are all at in the curatorial process.
at the risk of being reductive, I would just say, insofar as the SynBio projects bear directly on human dynamics and experiences and relationships, I think that bio artists are, in some part asking the same questions that artists have always asked.
Absolutely. That's succinct and accurate and true. Thank you for that. I mean, this has been such an amazing conversation. So thank you all for sharing your input about this curatorial process for Emergence, and so excited to see what comes next in the programming. Antajuan, Stacy, Annie, it's been such a pleasure moderating this conversation with you, and I look forward to updates. Thank you to everyone who's attended, and also, of course, the Getty Foundation. More information about Emergence can be found on the website www.fathomers.org. So thanks, everyone. Have a great evening, and we'll see you at the next program.